Hey guys, welcome to episode 11 of the Weekly Update, the series where I talk about the paddles that I hit throughout the week. Now, originally I was just going to do a hybrid titanium comparison video, but I ended up getting more paddles in the mail, so in addition to that, I'll also be doing some first looks of some hybrid paddles that are coming to the market soon. But anyways, let's get into it. Alright, starting off, let's take a look at the hybrid titanium paddles I got to try out this week. The first one is going to be one that some people have asked about in the comments, and that's going to be the Roore Coronado. So this is a hybrid Gen 2 paddle, so very similar in dimensions to the 6-0 double black diamond. For the swing weight, we got 115, and the twist weight, we got 6.55. Now the main difference between this and other hybrid Gen 2s is going to be the face surface. While the double black diamond uses carbon fiber, this actually uses that polyester/titanium blend. So it's a lot softer in feel compared to the 6-0 double black diamond. The feel off the face is more plush, and the power isn't quite there either, and that's what we expect from these titanium paddles. I would say, while it is below the average Gen 2 paddle, it's a step above something like the 11624 Jelly Beans or the Sword and Shield C2s and the J2KC from the Honolulu Pickleball company. Now, there's nothing too special about this paddle. It's basically just a softer Gen 2. But what's most notable is that it has a very low price point. It goes for $70, and I believe after a discount code, this drops down to around that $63 price point, which is a very, very good deal for any hybrid Gen 2. And this is a really good beginner/intermediate paddle that I do recommend for a lot of people. That softer feel allows you to really develop your shots and learn the strokes for the game. Overall, I think this is a really fantastic option and very easy recommendation. The next paddle we're going to take a look at is going to be a bit of an older one, and that's going to be the Sword and Shield J2TI from the Honolulu Pickleball Company. For those of you unfamiliar with this is basically their J2K paddle, but now with the titanium surface. So it's got a softer feel off the face. Now, this shape is unique to the Honolulu Pickleball Company. It's a lot more bottom heavy and it's a lot more stable. So the twist weight numbers are going to be higher on this shape compared to something like the Coronado. But at the same time, while it is more bottom heavy and stable down here, it does have a smaller sweet spot at the top because the balance does drop down a bit lower. Now, this still is a paddle I recommend to a lot of people, especially if you didn't come from a racket sport background and you're not as consistent with hitting near this top area, then you might find this shape better. But for those of you that are familiar with my preferences, you know I'm not a big fan of this shape and I would take the Coronado over this shape. But this is, like I said, one I do recommend for a lot of people still, especially if you didn't come from a racket sport background. But in terms of the feel, it's very similar to the Coronado. I would say it's actually a bit stiffer. The Coronado is softer feeling, but the J2TI, it's still overall a really great paddle and one of the best intermediate beginner paddles out there as well. So definitely still one I recommend in 2025. All right, so the next paddle we're going to take a look at is one that's currently unreleased, but should be releasing soon, and that's going to be the Neonic Flow Swift Titanium. So this is a hybrid Gen 2 16mm paddle, and for the swing weight, we got 113, and the twist weight, we got 6.35. Now, this is the flow shape, which is unique to Neonic, but it's the same as the flow, but now with a titanium surface. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the flow, it's one of the faster hybrid shapes. So compared to like the 6-year double black diamond or the J2K shape, this is faster and more maneuverable, but at the same time, it's also the least stable. As you can tell by the numbers, it cuts through the air fast, but it's not as stable on the sides, especially on the off-center shots. Now, the way I see it, I think there's two ways you can really use this paddle. One is completely unweighted, which I like to do just because it leaves the edge guard showing, and I think the paddle is really nice how it looks. And with the strength of the paddle, because it cuts through the air fast, it's really nice on shots that require a lot of wrist. So if you're going for aggressive rolls and flicks, the way that the balance is and the way that it cuts through the air fast, it feels really nice on those shots. But the other way you can use this is because it does have lower numbers, and because it is on the faster side for a hybrid paddle, you can weight it up more. So you have more room for customization in terms of where you want to add the tape and where you want the balance and everything to be. So those are the two ways I see you can use the flows, and that's what's the most unique thing about the paddle. In terms of how this compares to the other flow paddles, it's just softer. It's just like how the other titanium paddles are. They're just softer in feel. They're more plush in comparison to their carbon fiber counterparts. But compared to the other titanium paddles, like I would say this is actually a bit stiffer compared to the J2 Ti and the Coronado. But overall, if you're a fan of the flow, I think this is a fun one to look forward to. All right, so the last titanium paddle we're going to talk about is going to be the bread and butter Invader. So like the others, this is a hybrid Gen 2 paddle, but the difference is while it does have titanium in the surface, it has fiberglass in the surface as well as the bottom layer. So compared to all the other ones, that fiberglass gives this a bit of an extra power boost. So it comes out on top for both power and pop and overall firepower compared to the other three paddles we've talked about. The titanium still gives it a softer feel, so it feels nice on those softer shots like dinks and resets. It's not quite as soft as the others, but it still has a titanium feel. But you really feel the fiberglass giving you the extra power boost, especially on drives and putaways. And when someone drives at you and you're hitting a counter and punching the ball back, you also just feel that nice crisp feel from that fiberglass shooting the ball back at them. So I still really like this paddle, and this is probably my favorite hybrid titanium one out of the ones on this list. And in 2025, I still think this is a fantastic paddle to consider. All right, moving on, let's take a look at the other hybrid paddles I tried out this week. The first one's going to be a bit of a fun one because this is just a prototype and it won't actually officially be released, but it's one of the Preludes from Chorus. So I got the Shapeshifter 6K HX. So very happy to get this one because the Shapeshifter HX, the original one, it was one of my favorite paddles right now. And I got to try out this one, which is basically, from what I remember, a different carbon fiber weave. I think it's a 6K weave, and then the cell diameter is a bit smaller at 6 millimeters. But it's really similar to the Shapeshifter. I think it's a really, really small change. It's not as dense feeling. It's a bit more poppy and stiff. So it's just like a slight power boost and a slight upgrade compared to the original Shapeshifter. But overall, very fun paddle to try out. I don't think they're actually going to release this one because I think it's still too similar in feel to the Shapeshifter, but thanks, Chorus, for sending this one over to me. It was fun to try out. Moving on, let's take a look at the Middleweight Champ from Dynasty. Another hybrid paddle, but with a 14mm core thickness, and this is actually a Gen 3 style paddle. So it has a second foam layer that goes around the top half of the paddle in that diving board style. The owner himself said that the design inspiration behind this paddle was to do a more durable Yola Gen 3S. And they've been pretty upfront about their PB core numbers, as this comes in at 0.425. I know that they did some design changes to make it a little bit less hot than a Yola Gen 3S, and that's basically what it is. It's not quite as powerful and poppy, but the feel is there. You do kind of get that bit of like Gen 3 hollow feel to this paddle. It is also in a hybrid shape, which none of the Yola paddles have, and I would actually say the paddle this is the most similar to is going to be the Franklin C45 with some weight on it. Both are hybrid paddles, and both aren't quite as powerful and poppy as the Yola paddles, but at the same time, I haven't really tested the durability of this, so I can't speak to if this does break in and when it does break in, like how much more power it's going to get. But for how it is now, I think it plays like a Franklin C45 with some added weight, and we'll see what happens in the future with when I do get some more playing time with it. Now, one thing to note about this is that there are two versions. This is version 2, and there's version 1 here. So this one has a much grittier surface where the graphic is, and this one has a smoother surface. Now, there's supposedly just a 5% difference in the spin, but I think that's only really when you're like hitting like a drive from the baseline. And at that point, like when you're doing those topspin drives, you don't really notice it as much, but you really notice it when you're hitting like slice or topspin dinks from the kitchen, especially when I was trying to do my two-handed dink with this one versus this one. I felt like I couldn't grab the ball as well with the original version, and with the version 2 with the grit, you could just grab a bit more and it just felt nicer, especially on the slice dinks too. The price difference between these two is $5, so if you are considering this paddle, like I'd go for this one. I believe this goes for $185, so it's already cheaper than the Franklin C45 and the Gen 3 S's. But I think this is a fun like Gen 3 style paddle to consider. I don't have too much information on it yet, but hopefully I'll get a chance to hit it more and provide an update for you guys. All right, the next paddle we're going to take a look at is going to be one we covered briefly in the past, and that's going to be this one from SpinDNA. So another hybrid Gen 2, but this has Kevlar in the first layer and then followed by a layer of carbon fiber and then fiberglass at the bottom. So very similar to the bread and butter Invader and the Chorus Shapeshifter. For the swing weight, we got 116, and the twist weight, we got 6.75. Now, I think my opinion of this is still kind of holds true for my first impression. The first few layers aren't as soft compared to the Invader and the Shapeshifter. And so there's less of a change from the first layers to that fiberglass layer, but at the same time, it's still noticeable. Like you can definitely tell that the first layers are softer and you can feel like there's like that harsher feedback from the fiberglass later. Side by side compared to the Invader, like I think the Invader is easier to control with like softer shots because the first layers are softer. But when you're hitting something like a counter, like side by side, like these two are basically identical. Like when you're hitting and getting into that fiberglass layer, you get the fairly similar feedback between the two. So I would say that this is actually a very solid paddle. It's basically a budget version of the Invader. Goes around like 60 bucks, so very affordable. But yeah, I don't have anything bad to say about this paddle. It is a bit on the heavier side, but it's all due to personal preference. But definitely an interesting one to check out still. All right, now the last paddle we're going to take a look at is going to be the Gherkin Nightshade, another hybrid Gen 2 with a 14 millimeter cell core and a slightly wider cell diameter at 10 millimeters. The surface is CFC, so it's carbon fiber followed by fiberglass and then another layer of carbon fiber. And for the swing weight, we got 113, and then for the twist weight, we got 6.45. So both very solid numbers for a 14 millimeter Gen 2. Now, like I said earlier, it uses the slightly wider 10 millimeter cell diameter, and that's something that's becoming more popular recently. I think Paddletech started doing it, and then a lot of brands have been trying to mimic it. So we see it in the 11624 Alphas, the Unmarked from Mark Pickleball, and the Thrive Smoke. So the Nightshade compared to some of these other 14 millimeter Gen 2s with like the 8 millimeter cell diameters, it's a lot more crisper feeling off the face, a lot more poppy, and kind of more springy off the face. And I actually prefer the feel of this compared to like something like a Carbon 1X 14 millimeter. I think it works really well with that, with the whole layup of the CFC with like the wider cell diameter. I like this better than the Alphas and the Unmarked. I think it works really well on this. Now, I don't think this is quite as poppy and crisp feeling as the Smoke or the Paddletechs, but I think this is a bit more controllable in my opinion. So this is a really fun one and really surprising paddle to me. I quite liked it when I hit it this week. Now, it does come in an elongated option, and those of you that do know me know I do like that shape better. So now that I'm done with the hybrid testing, I am going to switch over to hitting the elongated one. So I'll see how that one is, but really looking forward to this Nightshade from Gherkin. I think this should be releasing in April, and I'll be looking forward to that. Anyways, that's it for this week's episode of the Weekly Update. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. All right, thanks guys.
All right, 1-on-1. All right, 1-on-1.